Alan Wake 2 is a survival horror game that masterfully integrates metafictional elements without relying on the common trope of overt fourth wall breaking. The game instead uses a variety of metafictional elements such as pastiche and mise en abyme to provide expressionist visuals and comment on the writing process. The game heavily utilizes symbolism and narrative duality to explore the horror genre's tropes such as the tortured artist. By examining both the horror genre and the nature of art through its ficto meta-narrative, Alan Wake 2 distinguishes itself with its bold and innovative approach to narrative deconstruction.
Writing is the key. Art is the key to find my way out of the dark place. The writing has to be just right, just right! I'm awake. I'm back. I'm feeling awful. Get it together, man. Return. I was writing. Return. Something went wrong. Doing something wrong. What's between departure and return? The tasks, the challenge, initiation. Yeah, I haven't written that. Can't go to return before initiation. That's right. That feels right. I'm lost. I'm lost in the dark, drowning. I'm drowning. I'm trying no way out. There's no way out. Sinking deeper, deeper, deeper. This is hell. This is my story. You're in my story. Get out of my story. There's no escape. You will never escape. Just write me out of this story.
Aesthetically, Alan Wake 2 uses different horror genres to pay homage to previous Remedy games through the use of pastiche. Saga's narrative utilizes folk and paranormal horror through the dark and desolate forests of Bright Falls. Elements of folk horror are evoked through the Witch's Ladle Puzzle, a folk tale in Bright Falls about a woman who drowned in a lake in search of its power, a key homage to the first Alan Wake game. Paranormal horror is infused in Saga's story with supernatural elements inspired by the original game's thriller and Stephen King influences. These elements are also propagated into Alan's narrative through a 20-minute long short film, Uden which is found in the chapter Zane's film. The short film includes many homages to Control and Alan Wake, predominantly featuring folk and paranormal horror as a microcosm for the game's themes. The short film also references the Federal Bureau of Control, which is heavily involved in the plot of the game. The FBC, the main government agency established in Remedy's previous game, Control, connects the two stories as part of the same universe. Moreover, the mysterious Finnish janitor Ahti plays an important role both in Control and Alan Wake 2, assisting the characters to complete their journeys.
Don't worry, Tom. The sun will shine even into a heap of twigs. You can go to the basement and check the generator. But look out. You can never know in which tree the devil sits.
In contrast, Wake's narrative involves heavy allusions to Remedy's previous works, particularly the Max Payne series. The Dark Place manifests as a New York City neo-noir setting, serving as a self-aware meta-reference to his writing. Alan's novels incorporate neo-noir elements reminiscent from the Max Payne games, with his own protagonist, Alex Casey, inspired by the titular character. Casey's face model is based on Sam Lake, the game's writer, and both characters are voiced by James McCaffrey, serving as a direct homage to the series.
You're in a computer game, Max.
I was in a computer game. Funny as hell, it was the most horrible thing I could think of.
The irony of being trapped in a postmodern detective story. I wanted to turn to the hidden camera and tell them to fuck off.
Casey plays an important role in both Alan Wake's written stories and the unfolding horror story coming to life in Saga's narrative, as he is Saga's detective partner. The purpose of using pastiche as a postmodern meta-element in Alan Wake 2 is for two reasons. Firstly, it gives the game a unique combination of visual styles that differentiates itself compared to other horror games, while also celebrating Remedy's previous works. Secondly, it allows for the game to borrow elements from different genres, such as horror and thriller, which is from Alan Wake, and neo-noir from Max Payne, to create expressionist visuals that form the dreamlike world of the Dark Place.
A murder cult was following the story to commit their gruesome acts. Was Wake their leader? Had he written it? How far would he go to create a perfect work of art?
The aesthetics and visuals of The Dark Place are reminiscent of the artistic movement Expressionism, which was prominent in the early 20th century. The movement has its roots in Weimar-era Germany that seeks to create true emotion within the artist's work, rejecting the depiction of cinematic realism prominent in the 1920s in favor of art that depicts the artist's inner life at the forefront of the piece. Films such as The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Phantom express dreamlike imagery that analyze the inner conflicts of their characters, dissecting the human condition, with themes of violence and betrayal being highly prominent. Many of these films had a significant impact on filmmaking, influencing many filmmakers in the horror genre, such as Ridley Scott. The Dark Place combines neo-noir elements, such as heavy fog, bright neon lighting in a New York City-inspired setting, alongside horror elements such as light as a gameplay mechanic, dark environments, horrific imagery, and visual chromatic aberration are used extensively. The choice of these visual elements together creates an otherworldly atmosphere that twists the player's perception of reality. Thus, by using literary devices such as pastiche with the combination of these visual styles, Alan Wake 2 exemplifies expressionist visuals within the genre of postmodern metafictional video games. The meta-commentary in Alan Wake 2 serves to question Alan's writing abilities, where his skills as a writer are questioned multiple times in the narrative. The game employs Muzon Ibrahim to create an embedded narrative, or a story within a story, to comment how Alan's writing affects others outside of the Dark Place. One example of this is Alan's use of Saga's daughter, Logan, as a plot device for his story. The game begins by establishing Saga's daughter in a stable family relationship. Alan writes the fictional story with Saga being the tragic hero, a common trope in horror fiction, where her daughter drowned years prior and her marriage has fallen apart. Saga's explicit condemnation of Alan's actions.
It's the only way.
Then change the story. You cannot write her in. She's my daughter, goddammit!
Serves as a criticism of the cliches surrounding the tragic hero commonly found in horror stories. It also functions as a character motivation for Saga to solve the case and save her daughter. More importantly, it also makes Alan Wake an unreliable narrator for the game's narrative, therefore questioning Alan's writing capabilities through his interjection of Saga's personal life. The game employs ficto meta-referencing within its narrative to criticize the tropes associated with the horror genre. The game accomplishes this through Saga Anderson's character, who is aware of the narrative coming to life around her. Saga's storyline utilizes many traditional horror tropes in association with Alan Wake's writing. One example of this is through the game's excessive use of jump scares. Which are predominantly present in Saga's storyline and sparingly used in Alan's. Saga's reactions to these story moments serve as a criticism of their overused nature. Her response,
Oh, come on.
during a jump scare, which then adds another obstacle in her path to progress the story. These jump scares occur extremely frequently in Saga's narrative, both as a way to frighten the player and to serve as an implied meta-commentary on its overuse in the genre. Another trope in horror is hearing the voices of loved ones. Auditory hallucinations are a common theme in psychological horror games such as the Silent Hill series. Alan Wake 2 distinctly utilizes this trope in Saga's narrative, particularly during each overlap, a bridge between the real world and the Dark Place. Saga's response to these hallucinations of her fictional dead daughter is one of genuine disgust.
Mommy, what are you doing? Help me, please.
This isn't real.
Mom, help me.
Fuck this place.
Her rejection of these auditory hallucinations serves as a method of refusing the cliches associated with the genre, inclined to the use of jump scares. This critical meta-commentary on the tropes in psychological horror is further reinforced by the game's ending, where Saga and Alan strive to save everyone in the story.
I won't let the horror story take Logan and Casey. They need to survive. Non-negotiable.
Not just them. We need to try to save everyone.
Saga's explicit rejection of the story elements and the tropes around her function as a criticism of the genre's cliches. This rejection in favor of breaking tradition makes the game an anti-game or an anti-novel, due to its breaking of traditional storytelling methods. Therefore, by utilizing mise en abyme through an embedded narrative, Alan Wake 2 serves as a strong metafictional game that comments on and rejects the tropes of the horror genre, which compromises the writing abilities of its main protagonist, Alan Wake. While the metafictional elements in Saga's narrative seek to reject genre and literary conventions, Alan's narrative focuses on the trials and tribulations of the creative process, finding himself stuck in constant loops until he can draft the perfect horror story. The Dark Place functions both as a pastiche element and a representation of the difficulties encountered in narrative creation. One meta-reference that symbolizes the difficulties of the writing process is through the signature enemy that Alan must fight throughout the game, the shadows present throughout the Dark Place. The shadows whisper Alan's inner thoughts, amplifying his insecurities and doubts as a writer. These manifestations are from the writer's journey videos that Alan encounters, showcasing his uncertainties and lack of confidence with each cycle. As Alan progresses, the video depicts his descent into madness, as dying in the game symbolizes a failure of a draft. The shadows vocalize Alan's self-doubt, expressing sentiments such as,
I'm lost in the dark, drowning, I'm drowning. I just want to go. I've written so much. I just want to go home. I've written so much. I write, there's nothing left.
The portrayal of self-doubt, manifested as the game's primary enemy in Alan's narrative, symbolizes the common struggle amongst many writers and artists who question the quality of their work. Therefore, the shadows represent the negative, self-deprecating thought processes inherent in the artist as they undertake the creative process. Furthermore, the game's primary antagonist, Scratch, is the embodiment of Alan Wake's inner struggles and the social expectations that artists are expected to conform to. Scratch, Alan's doppelganger, symbolizes the repressed and intrusive thoughts of Alan's psyche, in particular his ego. As the main antagonist, Scratch embodies the stereotype of the tortured artist, a concept deeply ingrained in Western art history and has become a social imaginary within popular consciousness, where there is an ingrained collective thought process that artists are depicted as, quote, egocentric, temperamental, unreliable, obsessed by their work, and altogether difficult to form relationships with. In a journal article titled Tormented Selves, the Social Imaginary of the Tortured Artist, and the Identity Work of Creative Workers, by Anna Alacovska, argues that artists are expected to conform to this perception of being, quote, sensitive and tormented, tasked with glorifying their moral deprivation and misery to become brilliant auteurs. Alan's egotistical tendencies are manifested in Scratch, who seeks to rewrite the story in his dark and twisted image. The game's final level is a representation of Alan's ego, as Alan must rewrite Scratch's ending where his novel, Return, is worshipped into biblical proportions.
Alan Wake is this generation's greatest storyteller!
The stage fight scene in Departure is one-upped by the absolutely mind-frying Dark Ocean summoning.
The choice to have the final level, Deerfest, coincide with Alan's character arc of overcoming both Scratch's writing and saving everyone in the story symbolizes the artistic autonomy that artists can obtain when not bound by the social expectations of the tortured artist. Thus, Alan overpowering Scratch's writing and the egocentric world he has created implies the overthrow of the social imaginary of the tortured artist. Another example of the game using meta-referencing to convey the writing process is through the game's main puzzle element, which is manifested in the writer's room, a playable area that Alan can use to piece together plot elements for various writing drafts. These shape the environment of the Dark Place to further progress the story. Alan has the ability to collect echoes throughout the world, which serve as inspiration for his writing. This gameplay mechanic of exchanging different plot elements together imitates the actual creative process, where ideas and elements are exchanged until they properly fit the narrative Alan envisions. The game's final revelation,
It's not a loop. It's a spiral.
Metaphorically represents the continuous revision and refinement necessary for the storytelling process, where each iteration brings the narrative closer to its final form, acting as a parallel for the writer's journey of striving for artistic perfection. Another method the game uses to symbolize the writing process is through the use of mise en abîme. The game uses mid-shots of Alan looking back at the CTR television that transports him to many different areas of the Dark Place. One of these segments includes the game's phenomenal musical section, Herald of Darkness.
What the hell?
From what I've gathered, you grew up nice and sheltered with mama's pretty stories and your own made-up fury. And mama gave me a magic clicker. Well, yes, I think it's true and fair to say.
Performed by the Old Guards of Asgard, a pseudonym for the real-life Finnish band Poets of the Fall. The musical features dynamic music and is divided into different key segments: Alan's upbringing, his rise to fame, a recap of the first game's events, and finally, leading to the present of him being in the Dark Place as the Champion of Light. Mise en abîme is extensively used when transitioning between each part of the musical segments, including each time Alan dies during this section. The usage of mise en abîme represents the time shifts between various points in Alan's life, and also functions as a representation of the various cycles Alan must go through to complete the musical segment. This is further reinforced by the musical's fourth verse, accompanied by distinct jazz music.
Echo seems to seek out again and again until I figure it out to bring this song to its end.
To finish the song, it requires the player to use the writer's board to finish the musical and piece together the climax. The musical's fourth verse functions as a microcosm for Alan's internal struggles to finish the story, as each death in the segment uses mise en abîme as a metaphor for the rewrites and drafts that are undertaken in the creative process of making the musical. The Herald of Darkness segment serves as a microcosm for Alan's entire narrative due to its metaphorical use of mise en abîme. Therefore, through this literary technique, Alan Wake 2 dissects the struggles and tribulations of the creative process, representing this process through the implied meta-reference of the writer's board as a puzzle element, creating something that is totally distinct and unique from anything else seen in metafictional gaming. Alan Wake 2 is a distinct and complex metafictional video game that combines various genres and aesthetics to comment on both the horror genre's tropes and the artistic process. Through the use of pastiche, expressionist visuals, and meta-commentary on the horror genre's tropes, Alan Wake 2 dissects the complex nature of fiction writing and the artists who create art. The game functions as a highly involved and thought-provoking survival horror title that stands out amongst other horror games, demonstrating the uniqueness of Remedy's approach to metafictional storytelling that will serve as inspiration for many other game creators for years to come.